Just follow this data configuration, there won't be any problems. I was momentarily distracted when I heard that familiar voice. Looking up, I saw John Carter urging the students to conduct the experiment.
The data is wrong.
I suddenly snapped to attention and rushed over, grabbing the test tube from the student's hand.
Professor Smith, these data were painstakingly calculated by my students and me. I've tested them many times, they can't be wrong.
According to your data, mixing the liquids will cause an immediate explosion, and everyone here will be blown to pieces.
I shouted, startling both the students and John Carter. But no student dared to take the test tube from my hand anymore.
Professor, the professor wouldn't say this without reason. How about we check the data again?
A student suggested, gaining the approval of the other students. John Carter's face turned ugly.
Michael Smith, you're doing this on purpose!
Do I need to explain how you got your data?
I stared at him coldly, then poured the liquid from the test tube into the waste sink. Seeing the primary explosive liquid destroyed, I finally breathed a sigh of relief.
Chemical experiments can cause explosions with the slightest mistake. Your data has an excess of potassium permanganate, and the remaining liquid contains strong oxidizers.
I said solemnly, wondering how someone like him could be a chemistry teacher leading students in experiments. In my previous life, it was my failure to carefully check the data that led to the lab explosion. Fortunately, I came back in time this time. Otherwise, these 8 students, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7.
Where's the other one?
Suddenly, a student turned pale and exclaimed,
"Oh no! David Johnson took the test tube to the second floor lab!"
I quickly turned to the student who spoke. His voice trembled.
"He thought this lab was too crowded and went to the second floor alone."
I scrambled out of the lab, followed by the other students. Just as I reached the second floor, boom! An explosion shook the entire building. The hallway floor was covered with debris and indistinguishable remains, along with severed limbs. I felt something hit my face, and when I touched it, it was flesh. I could still feel the burning pain on my body. The students behind me screamed sharply, almost breaking their voices, accompanied by the sounds of retching. They collapsed to the ground one by one. The second floor lab had exploded. They looked at me in shock. John Carter's face was also pale, his eyes filled with panic. Someone came running up the stairs. It was my wife, Emily White.
John, are you okay? Are you hurt?
No, I'm fine.
Call the police! Call an ambulance!
A student finally came to their senses, trembling as they took out their phone, only to realize that all phones were left outside the third floor lab. Phones were not allowed in the chemistry lab to prevent accidents. Seeing the bloody scene in front of them, they cried and ran out. Only the 3 of us were left at the scene.
No, we can't call the police!
John Carter, it was your data error that caused the lab explosion. Why not call the police? And the ambulance?
Before he could speak, Emily White spoke up.
Michael Smith, what do you mean? You also bear major responsibility for this accident. You're the professor.
Emily White stood in front of John Carter, speaking discontentedly. I looked at her standing against me, just like in the past life when those 8 students died in the explosion. She also stood in front of John Carter, making me take the main responsibility. When I admitted to the media that I was also responsible, she and John Carter pushed all the blame onto me. I couldn't defend myself and was nailed to the cross of shame. Under the media's condemnation, I was cyberbullied, and the police interrogated me based on my own words. The death of 8 students drew significant social attention. Even though the school was reluctant to lose someone who had won world-class experimental competition awards, they had to expel me. Due to this major mistake, the parents of the 8 students tied me up, set me on fire, and when I was barely alive, strapped a bomb to me, causing me to be blown to pieces in agony. My daughter was also ostracized and bullied by her classmates because of me, forcing her to drop out of school. In the end, she succumbed to depression. Meanwhile, the culprit, John Carter, took my place and became the youngest professor. My wife, Emily White, neglected our daughter, focusing only on her first love, John Carter. It was a week after my daughter died, when her body started to smell, that the neighbors discovered her. Thinking of this, I felt my heart bleed. My cherished daughter was treated this way by Emily White. The two of them leaned on each other, with Emily White still trying to persuade me, even threatening me.
This is just a minor accident, only one person died. You're the youngest professor, the school won't do much to you, at most pay some compensation. But it's different for John, he will be expelled. Anyway, the student is already gone. Are you really going to divorce me, your wife, because of him?
Michael suddenly calmed down, looking at the woman in front of him who treated human life with such disregard.
I must have been blind to have fallen for such a woman.
In his previous life, Michael foolishly agreed to share the blame with John Carter, even though he was not at fault at all.
Look, this is the flesh of that student. He was 25 years old, already accepted for a PhD, with a bright future ahead. A minor accident?
Who the hell said it was a minor accident?
Michael raised his hand and slapped her hard. She screamed and fell to the ground, her face already swollen and red.
Emily is your wife, and you treat her like this for an outsider? I should never have entrusted her to you.
Michael kicked him hard, his eyes red with anger, a fury burning inside him.
John Carter, don't act so noble. This accident was caused by your academic fraud and falsified data, leading to the student's death, and you want to pin it on me? No way.
If I hadn't stopped you, it wouldn't have been just one death, but 8.
Both of them fell to the ground, and Michael clenched his fists, gritting his teeth.
Mom, I want to go home. Someone died at school.
While they were confronting each other, a student frantically called their parents. They looked at David Johnson's remains in terror.
James, you are my most valued student. This accident was caused by Michael Smith, not us. I'll help you get your PhD. I am your advisor, and only I have that authority.
The student named James's eyes flickered, and he slowly looked up at him.
Really?
Really? I promise. I will also cover all your PhD expenses.
With one promise after another, James Walker nodded.
Michael Smith, since you refuse to take partial responsibility, don't blame us for putting all the blame on you.
Son, what happened? What do you mean someone died?
James Walker's parents arrived, calling out loudly for him. They lived near the school and drove over immediately after receiving James's call. Seeing the remains on the ground, Laura Walker fainted into Robert Walker's arms.
Call the police.
Mr. Walker, it was him, Michael Smith. He gave the student incorrect data, which led to the explosion.
It wasn't me. It was John Carter's group.
Michael couldn't let himself be wrongfully accused. This time, he wouldn't take the blame for them. As John Carter was trying to shift the blame, a sudden click drew everyone's attention. It was a student taking pictures with their phone. Seeing them notice her, she bit her lip in fear. At that moment, the security team arrived. Seeing the remains on the ground, they immediately became alert.
Officers, it was John Carter's group that caused the explosion.
John Carter, however, remained calm, showing no signs of panic.
Officers, he is falsely accusing me. My students can testify. He gave the students the data and forced them to do the experiment. I tried to stop him, but he threatened to expel me. Right, James, Sarah?
Michael watched helplessly as the two students nodded. The security guard's sharp eyes immediately focused on me.
The specifics will be investigated by the police.
As we waited, a group of reporters rushed in. It turned out that a student had posted about the explosion online, attracting a bunch of the fastest reporters.
Are you the youngest professor, Michael Smith? It seems you've won several international competition awards, but now your experimental data error has led to a student's passing. Mr. Smith, please explain the reason.
One reporter after another blocked my way, and the security guard had to hold them back to prevent me from getting hurt.
Dear reporters, I, Michael Smith, guarantee that I did not make any data errors. The real mistake was made by John Carter. His team used online data for the experiment, which caused the lab explosion.
I spoke into the microphone, seeing many cameras pointed at me.
Michael Smith, your data was all wrong. I tried to stop you, but you wouldn't listen, and now someone has lost their life.
Exactly, Michael Smith. Are you trying to blame John Carter for this accident just because you're a professor and he's only a lecturer?
Sure enough, the reporters, hearing what they said, immediately thrust their microphones in my face. #youngest Professor Michael Smith's lab explosion hashtag trended online quickly, marked with a hot symbol. In my previous life, the online buzz forced the police to investigate quickly while I was being cyberbullied. Emily White, with red-rimmed eyes and a hoarse voice, accused me.
Michael Smith, as your wife, I never expected you to do such a thing. I regret not stopping you when I saw you deliberately using online data.
Just as she was about to continue speaking, someone came running over her.
I got the surveillance footage from the security room, and it indeed shows Michael Smith.
The reporters immediately crowded around, and when they saw the footage, they erupted. Netizens also wanted to see what was on the footage.
Look, Michael Smith was the first to run out of the lab. How did he know it was going to explode? There's only one possibility. He calculated the experimental data, realized there was a problem, but it was too late.
Yes, Professor Smith calculated the data for us. I noticed the problem and told us not to proceed, but David Johnson went to another lab before we could inform him.
James Walker glanced at me and then quickly lowered his head.
That makes sense. If he didn't do the calculations, how would he know there was a problem? Justice must be served.
I saw the netizens' insults directed at me and the false accusations from James Walker and Sarah Brown. I suddenly didn't understand the purpose of my rebirth. Was it to save them or to save myself? I saved them, but does my fate have to be the same as in my previous life? As the scene grew more chaotic, the police finally arrived.
Everyone, step back and secure the area.
They then took everyone present back to the police station, including the remaining 5 students. They were too frightened by the explosion to speak.
What happened in the lab? We need answers.
The students refused to answer, still in shock. While I was being taken to the police station for questioning, I didn't expect the online community to be even more agitated.
I knew he must have had connections to become a professor at such a young age.
Someone behind the scenes wanted Michael Smith to gain fame, so they credited all the achievements to him. He got arrogant and messed up the data.
Officer, why are we here too? The surveillance footage clearly shows it was Michael Smith's fault.
Emily White complained loudly, standing next to John Carter, glaring at me. Anyone unaware would think they were a couple.
Quiet, wait for our technicians to finish their investigation.
The police were not friendly to Emily White but showed some respect towards me. While we waited for the results, the school principal arrived in person.
I believe it wasn't Michael Smith's data error.
We know Michael Smith's capabilities. He couldn't have made a mistake in the experiment.
The principal and vice principal vouched for me to the police, and I saw the malicious look in John Carter's eyes.
The explosion was caused by David Johnson's improper operation. He had brought a phone into the lab, leading to the explosion before he even started the experiment.
Shortly after leaving the police station, I saw even more online condemnation directed at me. When I reached my doorstep, a group of reporters swarmed in.
Mr. Smith, can you explain how your data error led to a student's death?
How will you face the victim's family?
I frowned. This shouldn't be happening. Just as I felt confused, my phone received a notification. It was a live stream link. Hashtag Lab Explosion Truth John Carter Mentor hashtag. I clicked in to see John Carter and Emily White crying on camera.
I'm sorry I didn't stop Michael Smith from using incorrect data. As his wife, I know all his past academic achievements were fake. They were bought by the principal and vice principal. I know he truly lacks ability. This time, he used incorrect data from the internet, causing the explosion.
If the principal and vice principal hadn't protected him, how could he have been released so quickly? I feel sorry for the deceased child.
Seeing this, I was almost amused by their audacity. Their ability to shift blame was impressive, and their shamelessness made me feel sick. As the reporters were about to surround me again, my daughter came out, rubbing her eyes.
Daddy, why are there so many uncles and aunties?
When the reporters couldn't get answers from me, they immediately turned their microphones to my daughter.
Little girl, how is your daddy's relationship with your mommy?
Is your daddy academically dishonest and lacking ability, buying his achievements?
I won't let you talk about my daddy like that. My daddy is the best.
My daughter clenched her fists, standing in front of me with her small voice. I felt a pang of emotion. In my past life, I hadn't protected my daughter well. Since John Carter returned from abroad, Emily White only had eyes for him, completely ignoring our daughter. My daughter never got close to her. So in my past life, it took a week for neighbors to discover her death. Watching my daughter surrounded by people asking sharp questions, I pushed them away with a stern face.
Please leave my house, or I'll call the police.
After I said that, the reporters continued to ask questions, but a few security guards from the property management came and drove them away.
Don't disturb the residents' peace.
After driving away the reporters, I was about to close the door when Emily White and John Carter arrived.
Don't be ungrateful. Because of you, John lost his chance to be an excellent mentor and was expelled from the school.
I then realized that the school trusted my abilities and believed me when I said John Carter falsified data. They investigated and directly expelled him. No wonder they wanted to ruin my reputation through a live broadcast.
Mom helps bad people to harm Dad. You are also a bad person.
My daughter pointed at Emily White, her face full of anger.
Who gave birth to you?
Emily White pushed my daughter hard, knocking her to the ground.
Emily White! I want a divorce!
But she just casually flicked her hair and glanced at my daughter on the ground.
Divorce is fine, but give me the compensation from your parents' house demolition. I'll leave once I get the money.
Don't drag it out, Emily.
John Carter looked at me mockingly and glanced disdainfully at my daughter. After they left, I received a threatening message. There were also various harassing calls from David Johnson's family. They watched the live broadcast and came to my residential area, holding banners, demanding justice. I told my daughter to lock the door and not let anyone in except me. Downstairs, David Johnson's mother was holding his portrait and crying.
He's coming down.
Residents in the community opened their windows and looked down.
Mrs. Johnson, I'm very sorry about David. I couldn't save him.
Save him. You caused his passing. My son was only 25 with a bright future ahead, and you ruined it.
Mrs. Johnson's voice was sharp and heart-wrenching as she pointed at me. She suddenly lunged at me, her long nails scratching my face. I stepped back but tripped over something. She sat on top of me, frantically tearing at my clothes.
Michael Smith, as a professor, you used incorrect data and caused my son's death. Someone like you doesn't deserve to teach or even live. Give me back my son. Give me back my son.
Neighbors came forward to help me.
A student posted a video.
Mr. Johnson opened it and immediately called out to Mrs. Johnson.
Look, isn't that James Walker, our son's classmate? Listen to what he says.
Mrs. Johnson quickly took the phone.
Hello, everyone. I'm James Walker, a classmate of the victim. We were in the same experiment group. I feel very guilty for saying those things at the scene, accusing Professor Michael Smith of falsifying data. In fact, the one who falsified data was Mentor John Carter, while Professor Michael Smith saved 7 of us. I believe if David hadn't gone to the lab alone, he wouldn't have passed. I couldn't tell there was anything wrong with John Carter's data. I raised objections, but he dismissed them. He has always been arrogant, thinking everyone else is wrong, and only he is right, not allowing us to refute. When Professor Michael Smith said there was a problem with the data and stopped us from experimenting, John Carter still tried to stop him. If it weren't for Professor Michael Smith's firm attitude, I might have passed too. As for why I accused Professor Michael Smith at the time, it was because John Carter was my mentor. He said I could go straight to a PhD and would cover my tuition. I was tempted and agreed, but my conscience told me I couldn't do it, especially since David was my friend.
The video continued with more of James Walker's confessions. Mrs. Johnson didn't watch further. Her grip on David's portrait loosened, and it fell. She knelt on the ground, crying bitterly. I felt compassion but did not comfort her. They came with anger and left in sorrow. Who knew that after James Walker posted the video, John Carter did the same, but with just one sentence.
I'm just a mentor, while Michael Smith is a professor. Who has more influence on a PhD student, everyone knows in their hearts.
Netizens felt like they were being played.
I'll just quietly watch the drama unfold. Is this what the academic circle is like? It feels so chaotic. Even at a prestigious university, they can't focus on academics and have to start dealing with interests.
At Official University, please investigate this matter thoroughly. This is no small issue. Is it the professor or the mentor?
Netizens tagged the official account, and some even found the principal's phone number and started calling him. I received a call from the principal.
Michael, tell me the truth. What is really going on?
I told him everything, including John Carter's miscalculated data, which would lead to an explosion.
I believe you, Michael. Don't worry, I will investigate thoroughly.
What I didn't expect was that Emily White and John Carter came to see me again. They were in terrible shape. Their clothes were torn and dusty, stained with blood, their hair disheveled, and they were even limping. This time, their attitude was very humble.
Michael, for the sake of our marriage, why don't you take the blame this time?
Don't touch me. I find it disgusting.
Emily White's expression changed, but she still managed to smile.
Anyway, the principal will protect you. They can't afford to lose a talent like you.
Emily White, John Carter, are you out of your minds? Whoever is at fault should take responsibility.
My gaze was cold, and my voice devoid of any emotion.
John Carter, I made a mistake back then. I knew your written and interview scores weren't enough to qualify as a lecturer, but because Emily White begged me, I agreed. I truly regret it. If I had known, I would never have agreed.
Emily White raised her hand to slap me, but I quickly caught it.
Enough!
Emily White ranted, her hair already in disarray.
Then don't blame us for being ruthless.
John Carter said, suddenly punching me in the face, causing me to feel dizzy.
Emily, why bother talking to him? Our original goal wasn't to talk. Emily was just being kind, trying to reason first. Since you don't appreciate it, don't blame us.
I immediately realized they had bad intentions. Just as I was fighting with John Carter, Emily White went inside and took my daughter. My heart ached, and my eyes turned red.
Emily White, she's your biological daughter.
As long as she's not with John, it doesn't matter.
She held my daughter, who showed no reaction, making me anxious.
David Johnson's family is really ruthless, driving straight into us. But they couldn't. We're lucky.
As long as you admit to this, your daughter will be fine, and you can be together. If you don't blame me for being cruel.
John Carter smiled sinisterly, his hand caressing my daughter's fair face. My heart was in turmoil.
I agree.
They immediately took out their phones and pointed the cameras at me. They handed me a prepared script and made me read it. Unsurprisingly, when this video was posted online, I was harshly criticized. The principal called me right away, asking what was going on.
They were already looking for evidence. But why did you release such a video at this critical moment?
They threatened me with my daughter.
My daughter was still unconscious, and I didn't know how much sedative they had given her. The principal was silent for a long time, then offered some comfort before hanging up.
We'll figure this out. Try to stay strong.
If seeking revenge would endanger my daughter's life, I didn't know if I should pursue it. While I was in the hospital, someone from the neighboring bed saw me. I didn't notice them taking a photo, and soon a group of reporters barged in.
Mr. Smith, does your video confirm that you used your position to threaten a student into giving false testimony? And was the data error actually your fault? The police previously said it was a student error. Is your school covering it up to protect you?
The reporter's sharp questions left me speechless. Fortunately, the hospital security arrived and escorted them out. While my video was spreading everywhere, John Carter, although expelled from the school, found a way to make money by live streaming. In his streams, he repeatedly claimed that the academic circle at Jing University was chaotic, making it impossible for him to stay. This led to more criticism of Jing University from netizens. However, all of this ended with a video from an internet celebrity. The video showed scattered body parts and blood everywhere. It was very clear, capturing everyone's faces and voices.
It was just a minor accident. Only one person died. You won't suffer much loss even if you're mainly responsible.
Is a human life just a minor accident to you?
The video captured my outrage, Emily White's indifference, and John Carter's manipulation of James Walker, all clearly recorded. According to the internet celebrity, she had come to Jing University during the summer break to shoot a video, pretending to be a student. She unexpectedly heard the explosion and immediately rushed to the scene with her phone, witnessing the argument. As a sensitive content creator, she quickly recorded the incident. However, the fierce online backlash made her hesitant to release it at the peak of the controversy. She kept an eye on the online trends and, seeing me being wronged, decided to release the video. She had researched my background and felt it would be a loss if someone like me was ruined. Moreover, the words of the other two were infuriating, and their subsequent live streams to make money by playing the victim only added to her anger. She believed I was the most wronged and released the video. Seeing the video, I suddenly felt a sense of relief. This video immediately went viral, reaching the top of the trending list. The incident was significant, affecting the reputation of Beijing University and the entire academic community. Netizens were highly concerned. When the video was released, it garnered over 999 plus comments and shares within minutes. John Carter was still live streaming, even skillfully pushing sales. Suddenly, thousands of people flooded into the live stream. They all cursed him in the comments. John Carter noticed the comments and realized something was wrong. He immediately checked his phone. His face turned extremely grim. His knuckles turned white as he gripped his phone, and he couldn't continue the live stream. In front of tens of thousands of viewers, he awkwardly ended the stream.
What should we do? Darn it, who knew there was another influencer?
Just as they were panicking, they heard shouting from outside. A group of people barged in. Leading them were David Johnson's parents. Their eyes were cold and expressionless, looking at John Carter and Emily White as if they were dead. John Carter and Emily White were startled, then they were swarmed. My daughter had already been discharged from the hospital. When I returned home, I saw a camera on the table. I had bought it for my daughter. When I turned it on, it was still recording.
Dad, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn off the camera.
No, you did great.
Then I uploaded the video online and reported it to the police. I had been threatened. When netizens saw the video, they finally understood why I had posted that kind of video. The principal also called me.
I knew you had a reason. By the way, we found out it was indeed John Carter's data error. You saved those 7 students.
After hanging up the phone, I received a call for help from Emily White.
Michael Smith, please save me. We're trapped by those maniacs. They're coming at us with hammers.
Emily White, this is your own choice.
I hung up the phone, feeling nothing. When I went downstairs, many people were standing there. When they saw me, tears almost burst from their eyes. They looked familiar. They were the ones who had burned me alive in my past life. Back then, they were expressionless, watching me scream in pain as I burned. This time, they were full of gratitude.
Professor Smith, thank you. If it weren't for you, our children would have died in the lab explosion. We almost misunderstood you. Thank you.
The parents' gratitude contrasted sharply with their previous anger, leaving me momentarily dazed. Meanwhile, the principal handed over the evidence to the police, who released everything. When I heard about Emily White and John Carter again, they had been burned alive. This time, it was David Johnson's parents who did it. While the other 7 parents expressed their gratitude to me, David Johnson's parents remained the same as in my past life. I went to David Johnson's memorial, with the police present. After David Johnson was buried, his parents would be taken away by the police. When they saw me, their numb lips moved.
Professor Smith, we misunderstood you. We're sorry. I remember now, when David Johnson talked about you, it was with admiration and respect. He said you were his most admired teacher.
I didn't know what David Johnson had said about me. I just looked at his black and white photo on the memorial, still smiling. I knew the police technicians were wrong. He didn't cause the explosion by bringing his phone into the lab. It was indeed John Carter's mistake. He had originally left his phone outside, but John Carter demanded he record the experiment process and take photos, or he wouldn't count it as David Johnson's experiment. This was what the 7 students in the lab said. When they recovered mentally, they all posted videos publicly thanking me. During this time, I also gathered evidence of those who had cyberbullied me and handed it to the police. They had to face the consequences of their actions. This time, I wasn't mentally affected by their cyberbullying. Nor was I harmed by John Carter and Emily White's schemes. My daughter was happily and successfully studying. After dropping her off at school, I received news from the court. My divorce request had been approved. Emily White had been harmed, and she had done wrong, so the judge naturally approved my divorce. This life seemed different from the last. I looked up at the blue sky and took a deep breath.
Michael Smith, your professorship is still reserved for you. You can return to work anytime after your break.
The end.